Welcome, everyone, to a bonus Christmas Eve edition of the Cops and Writers podcast. I thought I would do away with the usual intros, no music, none of that, and just get to the meat and potatoes of the show. So, joining me today is returning champion, retired Chicago PD Detective Richard Rybicki. Rich, thanks for being on the show.
No problem, no problem. And let me just say one thing before we really get rolling. I've listened to myself on your podcast before, and I hate my voice. Oh my God. I never thought that I had such a heavy Chicago accent until I started listening to myself. In fact, when I was teaching school down here, after I retired, I was teaching some college courses in crime scene uh, investigation, and I even told the kids down here in Florida, "Oh, your accent. Sometimes I can't understand you." And they're like, "What? What are you talking about? Your accent is terrible." And I didn't believe them until I started hearing myself on your podcast. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe how Chicago-ese I sound.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was on a fairly large podcast and somebody was saying it's like, man, that guy has a Chicago, Wisconsin accent. And I'm
You
like,
do.
I didn't know there was such a thing, but I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a cross between Chicago, Wisconsin, and Irish. I mean, both my parents still talk with brogues. That's how I grew up. They got the
I
thick Irish accents.
with your Wisconsin influence in your accent, I catch it a couple of times where you go, you betcha.
Yeah, I know. It's like I've been here too long. I can't help myself. It's like, oh my God. Well, I remember growing
Oh,
up, people would ask me, it's like, what language is your mom speaking? And I'm like, English. It's just really hard to understand sometimes. But yeah, that's mom. So
hey, when we watch those British shows on TV, we got to turn the subtitles on. I can't understand them.
see, I can understand all of it. I guess I have an ear for it. I remember one time I was watching a Scottish movie with my kids, and they both asked me, "I said, what language is this?" And I'm like, "It's English." And they're like, "We have to turn on the subtitles. We can't understand." I'm like, it's clear as day to me, but there's certain parts of Ireland and Scotland I can't understand what they're saying.
Oh, the Scottish,
The
the
further,
Scottish.
oh yeah, that's tough. But the further north you go in Ireland, the tougher it is to understand them. I have learned that.
Hmm.
And after a few cocktails and they're talking like really fast, forget it. Cancel Christmas. It's done. It's over. But
Oh, who
yeah,
would think
that's
that the Irish would have cocktails, right?
yeah, I know, weird, right? Yeah. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and whatever else is
Merry
out there.
Christmas to everybody out there in podcast land.
Yes. So thanks to all of you who supported the show, bought any of my books, are in the Facebook group, fans of my work. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks to all of the Patreons who support this show. I do appreciate you guys. That's for sure. And anybody who has rated and reviewed the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you told a friend about my little podcast. I do appreciate it. Thank you. And if you haven't yet, as a Christmas present to moi, please rate and review the show on Apple or Spotify or tell a friend. It makes a huge difference. I don't know why or how this works, but yeah, the more ratings and reviews, the more Apple likes me and Google, and it's a whole thing. So please do that. I'd appreciate it. So I thought it would be fun to swap some being a cop during Christmas stories with all of you. Some of the stories might be a tad bit dark. So I will issue a trigger warning right away. There's one story I'm Rich said I shouldn't say it. I shouldn't tell this
No.
story, but I still might. If I don't, you can get me on the down low and I'll tell you this one. It's very dark, but I'll try
Yeah,
to.
I'm still voting no on that one.
All right. Okay. So Rich, why don't you start us out? First, what was the mood, in Chicago, it's district stations just like Milwaukee for Christmas. Was there decorations? Did you do anything special? What did that look like?
Oh yeah, somebody always put up decorations. We had a goofy little Christmas tree at the district desk when I was a patrolman. Um, just something they pulled out of a carton that's been there for the last 30 years. Um, and some dusty tinsel and garland they hang around the desk. Um, but the mood was generally festive, especially the desk crew. I think half of them were in the bag, you know. Um, but for the people working out on the street, we'd all kind of get together. We'd have dinner together at some restaurant or something. You tried to stay out of trouble. There were the occasional radio assignments, but nothing real big that I remember. Um, typical, mostly domestics,
Right.
mostly
Oh
dom
yeah. It's a very unhappy time, and a lot of people want to kill themselves around the holidays too.
Oh
So
yeah,
we'd
yeah, a
have a
couple of
oh
suicides,
yeah, you would
a
get that
couple of
too.
suicides.
Now, when
Um,
you were in the detective bureau, what was it like then?
Well, we operated on a skeleton crew because the nice thing about the detective division was that we can always hold stuff over unless it's a murder
Right.
or death investigation or something. We can hold it over. If somebody makes an arrest for a robbery or something, we go in there, we put hold papers on it, and we'll come in the day later and do the work on it and get the guy charged. We had 24 hours to hold. Well, back in the day, we actually had 72 hours
Yeah,
before
we
we had to charge him.
yeah, for us it was 72 for a felony and I think 48 for a misdemeanor.
Yeah, so misdemeanors we didn't go out on as detectives. We didn't
Right,
have to.
right.
But for the felonies, yeah, we'd slap hold papers on them and uh, leave it for another day. Um, like I said, it was a skeleton crew, and generally the way we worked it was um, you either got Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or New Year's Eve or New Year's Day off. You could pick one of those four to have
Oh,
off.
okay.
And it still kind of went by seniority. If
Right,
you're the new detective and you want Christmas Eve off, and you're not going to get it because almost everybody wanted Christmas Eve
right.
as the day. But you'd get Christmas Day or you get New Year's Eve. They tried to make it equitable in that way. So we always had a skeleton crew. But in Detective Division 2, in Area 4 on the west side of the city, we had a special Christmas tree. We had a Christmas tree in the office, and the ornaments were photographs of all the prior year's murder victims.
Oh, God.
And and it kind of got around the city that we were doing this.
Yeah,
The bosses didn't like it because it
right,
got around. They didn't care that we did it. They just
right.
didn't want to get around. But a couple reporters heard about it,
Oh boy.
and they came in um, and tried to snap photos of it.
Oh,
But but other than that, I didn't like it so much because not only murder victims, they'd put up some death investigations and there were kids on there and
yeah, you don't. Yeah, that's not
I,
right.
I didn't I didn't like that.
Yeah, I
Um
love police humor, but that crosses a line.
yeah, kids always crosses the line,
Yep, absolutely.
but
That's
that's why I told you that sergeant was going to hell.
yeah. Yeah, Rich and I were talking before I hit record about that one story that I had that oh God. Yeah.
He's
When
going to hell.
when he was when he was a career army guy and his commanding officer called him morally deficient.
Oh yeah. If he's telling jokes like that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I'm still friends with him to this day. He's a funny, funny guy. Oh my Lord.
Tell him I said he's going to hell just for
Well,
that one
he knows
incident.
that. He said he's taking a rocket ship to hell. He's taking the rocket sled. He said, "You're joining me, O'Donnell." I'm like, "Yeah, probably." Well, I'll be there with you. I'll have lots of friends. But same thing with us. It's like who works, Christmas and Christmas Eve. It's seniority based. The only way you could get off is with a scheduled vacation, and that was with vacation picks, of course. And we would have volunteer sheets. It's like, okay, who wants to work Christmas and who wants to work Christmas Eve? So we could make it, as fair as possible. You know, but New Year's Eve, unless you had a scheduled vacation, you weren't getting off.
We
That's
had the same thing when you were picking we called our vacations furloughs.
oh,
Like
okay.
doing the military. And so when you were picking a furlough, our year was split up into 13 28-day periods.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so the last segment of the year was 13B. There was 13A,
Mm,
13B, 2 week segments.
yeah.
13B always covered Christmas and New Year's. So everybody, the guys with the most seniority, they were grabbing 13B first, to be able to have Christmas and New Year's both off.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's the way it worked with us. And for the most part, people were pretty equitable. And like the single guys that had family out of state or something like that, they would just work both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So to
Yeah.
give somebody that had like a family or, little
Yeah.
kids, you want to be there when Santa comes in the morning, that kind of thing. And if you're writing stories about cops, it's like, here's the thing, especially if you work late shift, I mean, either you might get off or you're just zombie tired. You're expected to do all this family stuff. You have people that are visiting two or three different families over Christmas Eve. Doing the rounds and they're traveling and they're
Depending on how many times they were divorced.
yeah, well that's very true. Yeah, and trying to make everybody happy. And here's a pro tip to all you young coppers out there: you'll never make everybody happy. And I remember my first day in the academy. I forget who the instructor was. It's like Christmas is no longer December 25th. It's whenever you can make it.
Yep. Yep.
And no truer words were spoken.
Yeah. We also had those guys who would pick New Year's Eve to be off, as one of their four. And then the day before Christmas Eve, the 23rd December, they hit the medical. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sick. Oh,
hell
and they
no.
would do it every year. And they were just hated. These
See,
guys were just hated. Because
if
now
if
that screws somebody else. They got to come
right.
in and they pick
So
that day off.
if somebody did that with us as a boss, I'd say, yeah, that's fine. Bring your doctor's note. I want a
Yeah.
doctor's note. Otherwise, you're AWOL and you're going to get suspended.
Yeah.
So we had an answer to that. Or we're going to make your life miserable as a boss, and I had bosses that did the same thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
you pull a stunt like that, we're going to give you the worst assignments we can dream of. And you're going to be doing them for a long time. So think
Well,
long and
these were
hard.
usually the guys that had those worst assignments to begin with
Yeah.
because they were dogs. They were lousy
Yes.
detectives, lousy coppers to begin
Right.
with.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, but for us, we would usually have a feed and people would sign up. And it's like, okay, I'll bring potatoes, I'll bring soda, I'll bring, whatever, or paper plates or whatever. Then you had the guys that, forgot about it and were at gas stations at midnight on Christmas Eve buying sodas and
You
stuff.
know, this just gave me an idea for the book I'm writing now, is that I just introduced a new character, a boss of my main character who was a lousy cop at one point in his career. And so now this person he used to work with is his boss. And I wanted to make some reason why this new boss was angry, so angry, and was just hammering away at my main character. And this is perfect. This is like she screwed him out of Christmas,
Oh, yeah,
or he screwed
perfect.
her out of Christmas, and oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
people don't
that's a good
forget
one.
that. People don't forget
No,
that.
no.
But yeah, we
No.
had trees as well, and usually, they're dusty old things that are like 50 years old that, whatever. But cops being cops, they'd put donuts up on there for, ornaments. That was kind of funny. And yeah, then there was the Bruce Willis ornament of him like
Oh
crawling
yeah.
through the air
Oh,
duct with the lighter.
now there's a good segue.
Yeah, yeah, now we'll get to that later. We will, I promise.
Okay.
And then there was one with with Epstein. It says this ornament didn't hang itself, and neither did Epstein.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a funny, yeah.
There are
But
guys still doing those jokes, aren't there? Oh my
oh my
God.
God, cops have great senses of humor. There is no doubt about that.
And they never forget.
No, they don't. They do not. So the mood usually was my bosses, and then later on when I became a boss, it's like, you know what? Usually there was like rules or unwritten rules about cops loitering at the station. It's like you're not doing the citizens any good by sitting on your ass smoking and joking at the district. you have to be out there doing police work. And usually we're too
Yeah.
busy anyways, where you really didn't have to monitor it that
Right.
much. But around the holidays, we're like, all right, it's like if you want to smoke a cigar, do whatever, as long as you answer your radio calls,
Yeah.
we're pretty good with that. And we're like, giving out tickets. Well, where I worked, we really didn't do a whole lot of traffic because we're, shagging radio calls all night. People are killing each
Yeah.
other, stabbing each other, shooting each other, doing whatever to each other. So if you were going out with traffic at 2 o'clock in the morning, you were considered a coward. You're like, and
Yeah.
you're
Well,
you're a lone man on an island. It's like,
yeah, and the only reason you'd consider doing a traffic stop is because you want to see you want to shake down the guys in the car.
oh, absolutely. If it's a car full of gangsters, and you know that they're up to no
Yeah.
good, it's like,
And you
hey,
wouldn't write
look,
that ticket unless you needed some kind of probable cause.
exactly, exactly. So, yeah, there was reasons to get into cars, and that was through traffic stops. But smaller jurisdictions, they have a different mindset than when you work into a bigger city that's busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally get that. But so, we'd say, you know what, this tis the season not to give people tickets. Tis the season not to arrest somebody. If you can get away with not arresting someone, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, we would always be told to stay away from the district station too, on Christmas, be out on the street. But if you had a good desk crew and a good watch commander, they'd call you in one or two cars at a time
Oh,
just to
okay.
get the food.
Yeah, we would do the same. Yeah. Yeah. But later on, if it's slowed down, it's like, I don't care if you come in and have us, like I said, a smoke and a joke and or whatever. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Christmas.
like you were saying earlier, there's always a good spread on those holidays.
Yes.
People, outside people bring it in. Restaurants
Yeah.
will drop off food for us. Um, in fact, even a lot of the coppers will bring in stuff. It's like a big potluck, and
Yep.
yeah, they call us in one at a time, one or two cars at a time to eat, and then get back out on the street.
Well,
Of
and well,
course, it was seniority based too. So if you were low
yes.
on the totem pole, there was maybe a couple of crusts of pizza left or something.
Well, it was funny because I remember in Milwaukee, we had an organization called Shielded Hearts, and that was more or less wives of cops. And they would, on holidays or if something bad happened, like a cop got killed or hurt really bad,
Oh,
they'd come in with just a ton of food for us. And they started
yeah.
doing that. And it was just a nice little thing. It's like, wow. And at
Yeah.
least we knew that the food wasn't poison.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had to be careful about that. Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
firefighters. We're cops. It's like we don't want to get poisoned. So yeah, that's for sure. But yeah,
Yeah.
the mood, then then you always had the cops that were like, it's like, yeah, you don't have to arrest everybody you see tonight. If somebody's got like a little warrant or it's old, it's like one night,
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world. But of course, you had the cops that were looking to arrest people that night. It's like, I'm gonna ruin my Christmas is ruined. I'm gonna ruin somebody else's. It's jailing for Jesus time.
Yeah. Our TAC teams, like I mentioned earlier before we went on air, um, those were the plainclothes felony arrest teams. And the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, Easter, Thanksgiving too is a good one. That's when they would go and execute warrants.
Oh yeah,
Maybe there were arrest warrants. Other times there are search warrants because Pookie's going to be home visiting Mama,
yeah,
so it's the best time to grab him,
yeah,
having turkey dinner. Um, they were a lot easier to find on
yes.
holidays.
Yeah, now those are for bigger stuff where, the guy who's got
Yeah,
the speeding warrant or something stupid. So, or I missed that court date warrant.
they get a pass.
Yeah.
But the armed robbery warrant,
Oh, hell
ooh.
yeah. It's open season, baby. Absolutely. So, do you have any good stories, Rich, or would you want me to start or do you got something?
Yeah, you start. You start.
Okay, I'll start this one with I call it a crackhead Christmas with a communist cop. I'm working with a copper that he only lasted, I think, a year and a half, 2 years. He was a card carrying, full fledged communist. I mean, you'd be riding around all night. He was telling me how great the Communist Party was. And I'm like, well, take a look at history, buddy. it's not working out so great. You always say that it's like, well, this will be better because of X, and no, it's not. But be that as it may, that's one thing that I see like in books and TV or whatever. It's very typical cops. They all look the same, they all act the same. And the reason why I bring up he's a communist is because we had some like way out there dudes and dudettes that I worked with.
Mhm.
That's it's a melting pot and it's kind of fun when you look back on it. It wasn't always the same old thing. So that was kind of cool, but we and it just wasn't the job for him. He was kind of a pacifist and he just wasn't very aggressive. And not that, like aggressive in a bad way. He just didn't have that spark of, hey, I want to go out and, like be a cop. It was kind of like, eh. And he was always tired because his wife lived in Vegas. She
Oh,
lived out of
gee.
state. So he's taking red eyes, they're trying to make it work and something's going to break and it was bending and then finally instead of getting divorced, he quit and moved out to be with her. So good for him. But anyways, so we get our first call of the night was like at 12:15 on Christmas Eve, and I had maybe a year on, maybe a little bit more, and we get called, and it's one of the worst parts of the city. We get in there, and there's a young man there, and oh, his mom. Mom is like in her early 30s. He's 19, 20 years old. And she's high as a kite. I mean, you could tell and he's like, yeah, she's been smoking crack all day long. And I'm like, okay. He said she's out of control, blah, blah. So I start talking to him. Very nice young man going to college. And on that block, he's probably the only kid going to college. It's just littered with gangsters and poverty and whatever. So I'm like, this guy's a success story. He's very articulate. He's just a nice young man. So we're just talking. So I'm like, all right, I'll go get mom's story. And she's in the kitchen. And you've been around people that are high on crack. She's up and down, up and down, up and
Yeah.
down. She can, her skin is crawling. She's just going a mile a minute and she was like 5 foot 90 pounds.
Wow.
She'd been smoking for a while, and she had the sunken cheeks, the burnt
Yeah.
fingertips, the whole 9 yards. And my partner was in the living room, but we could see each other. I'm in the kitchen, he's in the living room, and I'm talking to mama, and she just would not sit down. She'd get up. I'd push her down. She'd get up. So I'm just getting information, and I'm like, whatever. So all of a sudden, the door just flies open in the living room. There's four of the brothers, of this kid's brothers. They're all older than him. We heard you hit mama. You hit mama. Now the fight is on.
Oh,
And they've got this they grabbed this one kid that's going to college, and the rest of them are street thugs, straight up. They're all criminals. And they grab him, they just start beating the shit out of him. And, my partner, the pacifist communist, is jumps in the middle, and now he's on the bottom of the pile. I just see his boots. So I call for an assist. It's the first time I ever called for an assist as a cop. And I'm like, holy shit. So I go running over to help him and I feel something on my back. Well, I've got mom. It's like I'm giving her a piggyback ride. And she's hitting me. She's punching me as hard as she can in my head. So my first instinct was, elbow. And she went flying. And just for like a split second, I'm like, oh my God, I just hit a girl. I've never hit her. I mean, it's ingrained in your brain since you were a little kid. It's
yeah.
like men don't do that. Men don't hit women. But I'm just like, I didn't know what she had. I didn't. It was like I got to help my partner here. So it was just a big old ruckus. The wagon comes. The cavalry comes. It's like we're fighting with all these people. We arrested everybody except for that young college kid. Everybody went to jail. So we fill the cell block and the booker's just looking at us and just like, really, guys? And it's like, didn't have a
Hey,
choice.
it is what it is.
Yep. And the sergeant was mad because we used force. He never filled out a report. I know he didn't. He was really, really lazy. Whenever you use physical force on anybody, you're supposed to call a sergeant, you call a boss,
Yeah.
and they fill out a use of force report. They
Yeah.
do their own little investigation. They take pictures. He didn't do any of that. He
They only started that a few years before I retired. So,
really,
around maybe around 2000 or so. The year 2000 is when they started use of force reports for us. Of course, if you fired your weapon, it was always
yeah.
mandatory, but just for, punching somebody or
Well,
tasing somebody, no, until they decided, well, we better document this because of all the lawsuits.
right. For us, it was you could strike someone with like a knee strike or a focus strike, i.e., a punch, or an forearm strike or whatever, and you wouldn't have to call a boss unless the person was injured. But
Hmm.
if you used your baton, if you tased somebody, if you OC'd somebody, any of that, you had to call a boss.
Yeah.
And then politics rears its ugly head, and it's like, people are complaining that the cops are drawing their guns on people all the time. Well, yeah, that's what we do. I mean, not, if it's a barking dog, you shouldn't go up there with your gun in somebody's face, but it's all common sense. We worked in
Yeah.
really, really dangerous neighborhoods and we're getting shot at all the time. So, yeah, we're gonna have our guns out. Action beats reaction. So the chief is like, okay, from now on, if you point your gun at somebody, that's a use of force and you have to call a boss.
Hmm.
So of course the way around that is, well, I really didn't point the gun. It was at the low, low, low ready.
Yeah.
So that's how you got away from that.
We uh we started getting beefs because coppers would approach cars on traffic stops with their hand on their gun,
Oh,
holstered, but just their
okay,
hand resting on their gun.
sure.
And they were getting beefs for that. They were getting
Come on.
complaints about that. Yeah.
I think it's
So,
super smart.
no, you couldn't do that anymore then. Is
Oh
that the
God.
ridiculous?
Oh, that's so silly. Silly, silly. So we're writing up all these arrests and the booker is like, "Hey, O'Donnell, your guy is hurt." And I'm like, "Which one?" So he's like his wrists. He said that you were cutting his wrists. I'm like, why would I cut his wrists? So the sergeant actually was watching him in the cell block. He knew he'd be trouble. And he was rubbing his wrists up against there were the iron doors. They were like jails.
Yeah.
And he's like, so the sergeant goes back there. He's like, stop this bullshit. He says, there's nothing wrong with you. And if you try to kill yourself, he says, I'll kill you first. And he's like, all right, all right, all right. Fine. Yeah. So
Good, good
that
sergeant.
was my
Good sergeant.
first Christmas story. Come on, you got to have something.
Oh, no, I really don't because in the last half of my career, it was all I was always off. I was able to get off. I
Okay.
had
Gotcha.
seniority.
Yeah, that's
And early on in my career, especially as a detective, Christmas Eve, you were able to sneak home for a while. You
yeah,
know,
that's different. Yeah.
we were in the days of pagers. This was before cell phones, where we had pagers. So you'd go home and you'd have dinner with the wife and kids and whoever
Okay.
else was over, and you just had your pager clipped to your tie and made sure you were available. And I tell you, we didn't get a lot of call outs
Okay.
uh, on Christmas. Um, no, as a patrolman, yeah, but mostly detectives. You got to be out there. You,
Right.
you got to be out there. A lot of domestics. Um, and they were always a fight, weren't they? They were
Yes.
always a fight. It's like as soon as you say, okay, husband's going to jail, well, then mama jumps on
Oh,
you. You get
absolutely.
taken to jail. It's Christmas.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, then why
So they
didn't you
wound
call
up
me?
both going to
Stop calling
jail.
me. Yeah, that's right. But then my next one, and I can't remember if this was the day after the assist. It may have been. I was working with a guy, and you usually didn't work with your regular partners on holidays because of like vacations and personnel was all like shuffled around, whatever. And you got to remember, I worked late shift for 13 years, midnight to 8. So that was what I was used to, and it was all patrol. So right out of the barn, we get a call for somebody shot. Anonymous caller. Yeah, Joe Blow was shot. All right. So we go again, one of the garden spots of the district, and we're like, all right. And we get out of the car and we're looking around and we're looking and it's like there was snow on the ground and it's like, oh look, there's a blood trail. Shit. All right. Because it was anonymous, there was no callback number. And if you don't see anything, you're like, well, we checked the area. But there was a blood trail leading up to a door to a Polish flat. We call them Polish flats in Milwaukee. Not to make fun of you or anything, Rich, but yeah. So it was a lower, it was like a lower kind of
Well, basically,
half-ass
a
apartment.
garden apartment.
Yes, it's a garden apartment. Yeah, it was real garden like, that's for sure. So we knock on the door, no answer. We knock on the door again. And the guy I'm working with, I think I brought him up one other time in the podcast. He used to play for the Bears. He he
Yeah.
was on their practice squad. This man was gigantic. He was, like offensive line, big. Because he played for the offensive line for the Bears. He was just the guy was just a manimal. He was a monster. And I'm like, okay. So he looks at me and I look at him and I'm like, all right, I'll kick it. So I kick the door. Sure enough, there's a guy on the ground and he's been shot. So we call for an ambulance. Med unit comes for a shooting. That's the paramedics from the fire department. And he's completely uncooperative. F you, blah, blah, blah. And my partner has like 2 or 3 years more on than I do. And he's like, yeah, those tats, he's affiliated with some Mexican street gang. And I'm like, all right. So he's a big gangster, blah, blah, blah. He's got a bunch of warrants. That's why he didn't answer the door. He had felony warrants. And it's like, all right. So, we call the boss and it's like, hey, we got a shooting victim. And he's like, really? Christmas Day. You've got a. Dude, I didn't shoot him. Somebody else did. We're just cleaning up the mess. So he's like, fine, I'll send some detectives out there. So they were all grumpy, that they had to go.
Yeah, their beepers went off and they had to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they had to
So,
leave their family dinners.
yeah. So we, I ride in the back of the ambulance with this guy. And my partner was supposed to follow me, but he didn't. He went somewhere else, and I'm just like, "Well," he said, "Yeah, I'll meet you at the hospital." And I'm like, "Okay." So I handcuffed the dude to the cot. I only had one pair of handcuffs because politics again rears its ugly head. We couldn't
Yeah.
have more than one pair of handcuffs on our belt
Oh, that's ridiculous.
because it's offensive to people. It's scary.
That's
And
ridiculous.
yes, most good cops have at least two pairs, at
Yeah,
least,
yeah,
for a variety of reasons. One, big guys, it's really hard to cuff them behind their backs.
yeah,
Sometimes you need two or three pairs of
yeah,
handcuffs for like big dudes. You'll pop out their shoulder, or you have more than one person that you're sending off to jail. So I've got the one handcuff, and this guy's being a dick, and there's a paramedic trainee that's in the back with the regular paramedic. And the paramedic trainee is this younger black guy. And this gangster didn't want to be touched by a black guy. And I'm like, well, you don't have a choice. He's starting an IV on this guy, and he's throwing the N word around. He's just being as obnoxious as could be. And I'm like, I'm really disliking this guy. I mean, not that I liked him to begin with, but now I'm really disliking him. And somehow he slipped out of the cuff. Now the fight's on in the back of this med unit, and my partner is nowhere to be seen.
oh,
I get on
geez.
the air. I'm like, yeah, I need some help here, and it it wasn't. We were in a dead spot in the city.
Yeah.
So now I'm rolling around with this guy on the cot that's shot, and I'm just like, I'm delivering focus strikes and doing whatever I got to do. Then I remember when I was in the academy, one of our instructors worked on the police ambulance way back in the 70s,
Wow.
and part of the 80s we had police ambulances.
Wow.
I know I don't think they lasted a terribly long time, but he
We
was.
never had those,
Yeah, we
at least
had.
in my own memory. You know.
Yes, we had police ambulances in Milwaukee. He had a bunch of good stories, and one time he told us, if you ever have somebody that's really uncooperative and they're shot, he said, if you put your thumb in their bullet wound, they'll be cooperative. So that spawned a memory in my head. I'm just like, all right, well, I'm losing the fight right now. This guy's winning. So I just shoved my thumb in there. And he's the high pitched squeal, and I was like, "Wow, that instructor was right," So I was able to get him handcuffed again. This poor paramedic that's been being abused for how long? He's just like he gives me the thanks nod, and I'm like, "Yeah, no problem, buddy." So yeah, that was another one of my Christmas Eves.
Okay, so you did remind me of one.
Good.
This talk reminded me of one. Yeah, I was a patrolman in a North Side district. It was a fairly good neighborhood, and we were going to assist another couple cars to a domestic violent teenager in a house. So we get in there. Mama's like, he's going crazy. I don't know what. I think he's on drugs. So we, oh, okay. And she brings us in, and he's in the dining room. Well, the dining room is separated from the living room by a pair of French doors,
Okay.
with like
Yeah, yeah. Glass
15
French.
panes of glass in them.
Right.
And um, he sees us, and he gets even crazier. Well, now he starts throwing stuff at the glass, and the glass is shattering and spraying towards us, and he sees that, and he gets excited, like, ah, ha, ha, I can keep them at bay with flying glass, right? So he gets closer to the French doors and he starts punching out the glass. And we're all standing back. Next thing we know, out of one wrist, he's spurting blood.
Ugh.
He like regular arterial spurts.
Oh God.
And it's like, oh my God, we're backing off. Now he sees us backing off even more. We don't want to get blood on us. This was before the days of AIDS, so we weren't too worried about that at the
Yeah.
time. We didn't want to get blood on us,
Right.
you
Nobody
know.
does. Yeah.
Uh, it's hard to clean these uniforms from, and so he's like squirting the blood out through the broken windows uh, at us, and finally he goes, "Oh, it's getting so cold."
Ah!
Boom, and he goes down. He goes down like crazy. It was like, okay, get an ambulance over here. And they wind up taking him to the hospital. He's passed out. We're like, oh my God, this guy, he bled out, right? We're
Yeah.
thinking he bled out. Well, we get to the hospital and they hook him up to an IV, pumping some plasma into him. And I asked the doctor, I said, is he going to make it? He says, oh yeah, he's fine. It's like, what do you mean? He passed out from blood loss. And he goes,
Yeah.
he only lost about a pint. And it's like, you're kidding. I like the room looked like something out of a Stephen King movie, you
Yeah.
know, blood all over the walls. And just a pint. He goes, yeah, you didn't lose too much. Says, oh, well, okay, lucky guy.
Yeah. I'd say. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
that was a Christmas Eve. That was a Christmas Eve to remember. So
Here, I got
thanks
one
for
more. I got
reminding me.
one more. This one is called "Never Volunteer. No good deed ever goes unpunished." All right. I was the late power sergeant. Oh, here's Clark in his Christmas sweater.
Hey, Mark.
Yep, he's got his Christmas
And
sweater
bow
with
tie.
reindeers and his bow tie.
Tell me the bow tie lights up.
No, it should, but it does have the Star of David, so I'm representing
There you
Hanukkah as
go.
well. So I'm trying to cover all bases here. I'm a multicultural dog here. But what happened was somebody needed off Christmas Eve. They were like really short on early shift. I was working late power, which was 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. So you got a foot on late shift and a foot on early shift. You're covering both
Yeah.
shifts. And I never had to be lieutenant. So I said, tell you what, I'll work 4 to midnight on Christmas Eve and I'll be the lieutenant because the lieutenant was nowhere to be seen. He took off Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. He
Yep.
took off every holiday.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So I'm like, you know what? I'll throw myself on the grenade for you guys, because you'd much rather be on the street. So I'm like, yeah, I'll take care of it, guys. So one other guy could take off that was on early shift. So the one of the big bonuses of working inside, one of the only ones, is you could wear short sleeves year round if you're working
Yeah.
inside. Whereas if you're at a district station and you're in uniform, if you're on the street, you got to wear long sleeves from like October through like May or something like that. There was a period of
Yeah.
time that
Yeah, we had the
for
same thing.
yeah, for uniforms. And I'm like, so that's the only cool thing about it. And that time of year, I would take all my uniforms and my coats, everything home because I knew I had vacation after that. After that I was off for like 10 days. So I was like, okay, I'll work New Year's, I'll work Christmas Eve. Then I'm off Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And I'm like, all right, not too bad.
Yeah.
Because when you were late power, you were the king of your own kingdom. I didn't count for staffing. So that was really nice. But
Yeah.
but I thought, yeah, I'll be the lieutenant. So the shift starts, and right away there's a line literally out my door. Yeah, what the way it works is when you're the lieutenant, you run that shift, and you get all the phone calls from the cops in the field or the detective bureau asking questions or communications, and you have to monitor the squads, make sure they're not sandbagging hitches. You have to monitor the cops. You're also in charge of the cell block, make sure the booker's doing their job, and you're juggling all this, and at the same time the communication sergeant is like, hey, you've got three P1s pending, what are you doing about it? And what that means is it's priority ones. Somebody shot, somebody stabbed, something in progress. So you're responsible for shagging somebody off of like a lower, you know, uh, assignment. Or if they're in with an arrest, it's like that body can wait. He's not going anywhere. Go back out. We tried not to do that, but sometimes you didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And when somebody was done with their paperwork, they would have to have it signed by the lieutenant. So that's all this is going on at once. And I literally had a line of cops waiting to get their reports signed. And that's usually there was a body attached to them, there was some kind of arrest.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I went, it was like 3 or 4 hours without any kind of break whatsoever, with cops coming in with their reports. So it was, I heard, and you monitor the radio to see what's going on. So I'm listening to the radio as I'm doing all this, and there was a shooting. So I sent, a boss and some cops out to a shooting. It was non fatal. And then, like 5 minutes after that, there was we call it a 20 pointer, which is either a fatal accident or a near fatal accident. There's a bunch of different stuff you have to do for that. And it sounded serious. And then I didn't hear anything. And the sergeant on the scene cleared all the squads except for one guy. And I'm like, oh, it must not have been that bad. So I see this cop. Again, there's just imagine there's like a line of 3 or 4 cops waiting to come into my office. And there's already a cop in front of me that I'm discussing how he screwed up his report. And I see another cop. He's this very shy, demure copper that's like 5'5" and just talked really low. He was just very, very soft spoken. And he keeps on peeking his head in my door. And I'm like, you're driving me crazy. What are you doing? I said, stop. Everybody stop what they're doing. I said, you get in here now. I said, why are you stalking me? You look like a stalker. And he's like, Sarge, I had that head-on accident. Two cars hit each other head-on. It was sleeting and icing out. The roads were terrible. And I'm like, yeah. He says, should I do blood kits for both of them? I said, what are you talking about? Blood kits. And what that is if you have a drunk driver and if they're injured or something like that, you do a blood kit. I said, yeah, do both. I said, you know what? How bad is this accident? Um, I'm not sure, but the one of the drivers, the woman, he said they're both drunk. He said they both had Modelo's. We call them Modelo missiles in the neighborhood that I worked at. Both of them had empty Modelos, and they both stunk like beer. Both drivers. And I'm like, all right, well then they both get arrested for drunk driving. And I'm like, well, what's the condition? Well, one guy isn't too bad. He's in the hospital, but he probably treat and release. And he said, yeah, then you're going to take him to jail. And I said, well, how about the other person? Well, she's not doing too good. And I said, what's not too good? He said, well, she has a broken neck. And I'm like, what? Yeah, she's
Oh,
not breathing on her own and she has a broken neck and she's paralyzed from the neck down. I'm like,
holy shit.
oh, and you're telling me this now? And oh, the cars are gone and it's pissing rain and ice. So any kind of physical evidence is literally gone. They didn't even take
Ugh.
pictures. So I called my buddy.
Oh my
So
God.
the guy who had an arrest, I said, get out of my office right now. Everybody else in line, go smoke, joke, do whatever you got to do. So I call my buddy that's at the motorcycles. Yeah, and I'm like, they're also in charge of the accident reconstruction. So I have this one cop sitting. He looks like he's about to start crying. I said, "Why didn't you call me? Why didn't anybody let me know this is like a near fatal accident? This is a big deal. I got to make notifications." He said, "Well, Sergeant, I'm not going to say who it is, told us that it wasn't that big of a deal." I said, "It's a very big deal. She's almost dead. That means it's a big deal. You're using the word dead. Is
Oh,
anybody at the hospital with her right now?" No. I said, and
oh,
I'm like, so I got somebody. I said, "Call me right away when you get there. Let me know if she's dead or alive and what kind of condition she's in." I'm like, "Thank you." So I
oh
call
my
my buddy. He comes in and he's just laughing his butt off. He's like, "Ha ha, this is funny." I'm like, "No, it isn't." He said, "You're in so much
God.
trouble right now." I'm like, "No, I'm not." Which, and I'm like, "Mother," oh, I was so mad. So he said, "The best you could do is take some pictures and hope she doesn't die." And I'm like, but thankfully she did not die. She did have a broken neck and she was paralyzed from the neck down.
Oh,
So obviously,
terrible.
nobody had insurance, nobody had a driver's license, no, and everybody was drunk.
Ah,
So it's almost like throwing offsetting flags. It's just,
yeah, really.
what do you do with it? It was just a mess. So he said, "Well, we could go to the tow yard and take some pictures of the car." He said, "I already messaged accident reconstruction. They're on call and they're actually at a fatal accident right now." So they said they might take, if she dies, let us know and we'll do what we could do. So then I have to call the detective bureau. I'm like, "Yeah, this is what I got." So I have this detective lieutenant just calling me everything under the sun that, that isn't nice. And I'm like, "Hey, dude, slow your
I
roll."
wasn't driving one of
Yeah,
those cars.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was my next Christmas, but it gets worse. So
Oh,
the late shift lieutenant was off as well. So a late shift sergeant comes in. He's one of my friends. And I'm like, "Hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. You have a good Christmas Eve?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." So I'm briefing him on all this stuff. And he's like, "What a cluster." I'm like, "Tell me about it." And I'm getting ready to leave. I literally stand up. He's sitting in the chair. And I'm like, "Hey, you know what? Merry Christmas." Then we both hear over the air, "Shots fired, shots fired. Get me a supervisor. I need backup. I need backup. Shots fired, shots fired. Give me
oh
a med
God.
unit." And we're like, "Ugh, no way." And the copper that's calling for help shot and killed somebody the Christmas Eve before that. He was a
Oh God.
he got sent to a gangster party. I think it was Latin Kings. And things got out of hand. There was shots being fired inside the party at this house. Him and his partner respond. They're in the alley, and there's people running out, of course, because they see the cops. And somebody runs out and starts shooting at him. Well, he returns fire and shoots the guy in the melon and kills him. So, 100% justified shooting. Well, he got sent to the hostage situation, mom and son. Son has knife to mother's throat. And we're like, and you know what that's like. 99% of the time, it's BS. That's not what it
Yeah,
is. They'll
yeah.
just say that or whatever. So, I half heard that when I was briefing him on all this stuff. And then I'm like, no way. He couldn't shoot somebody two Christmas Eves in a row. Oh, yes. Yes, he did. What happened was another Polish flat. This
Oh,
guy, this shitbird has a knife to his mom's throat and is using her as like a human shield. So, Mike Hopp isn't going to mess around with that. And he was obviously a very, very, very good shot. He shoots the guy in the mouth from about 20 feet away, if,
wow,
and the bullet goes in the guy's mouth and exits through his ear,
wow.
drops him, and he lives.
Yeah.
We didn't know if he was going to live or not. So the two sergeants that are there are all brand new and they don't know what they're doing. So my buddy looks at me and says, "Pat, would you mind?" And I'm just like,
Uh,
"Sure." Because I'll do it for my cop,
yeah,
because,
you got to do it. Yeah.
yeah. So I go out there and it was a very easy scene to contain because, again, it was in the Polish flat. It was this little area. I mean, And it was very clear cut. I mean, it was, yeah, mom was more than appreciative that, this cop saved her life. Yeah, so I get to the scene, I look at the cop and I'm like, just so you know, before we start any of this rigmarole, you're never working another Christmas Eve as long as I'm a boss. We're not going to go for a hat trick here. Two is enough. We're not going for the three-peat. Sorry. And he's like, Sarge, what the hell? And I'm like, I don't get it either, but
I don't know. I probably would have called somebody to try to get him transferred out of that district
he was a
just to
great
make
cop.
sure it didn't happen again.
He was an excellent cop. I loved him. But yeah, that was, and of course it was like 30 degrees. It was raining and sleeting sideways. And I had all of my coats and spare uniforms at the house. I was washing them because I knew I'd be on vacation. And I was going to work inside, right? I'm not going to be outside. So I'm out there freezing my ass off. And I'm just like, why does God hate me so much?
Short sleeves.
Yep. Oh, so that was that one. And I won't I won't go into the other story.
No,
All right. Do you have any other ones?
no, I'm done.
All right. So I
I'm not
know
remembering that.
I know this is a very tough time of year for, I'll get a little serious here. This is a tough time of year for a lot of people. You're not alone. If you're feeling down or whatever, call a buddy, call a priest, call a rabbi, call your bartender, call anybody. Just talk to someone. The suicide hotline, they have it super easy now, 988. 988. And there's actually a police hotline. It's 1-800 267 5463. 800 267 5463 or 988, and they'll direct you in the right spot. You are not alone. Don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary situation. I know Rich and I have both been involved in police suicides. We've had to deal with this kind of stuff in the past, and it's very preventable. And I know this is a very tough time for a lot of people, but you'll get through it. I promise. All
It
right.
may seem like the end of the world today, but wake up in the morning and things will be different.
Absolutely. Every time. So let's talk about Die Hard because,
Oh,
hey, it's Christmas.
okay.
Is it a Christmas
Absolutely a
movie?
Christmas movie.
I say yes. You say yes?
I say yes. I
All
say
right.
yes. We're on the same page here.
Yes,
Okay. One, it takes place on Christmas Eve
it does.
at a Christmas party.
Hmm.
And more than that, though, the themes of the movie are family, redemption, and sacrifice.
There we go.
That's a Christmas movie. Could be on the Hallmark Channel.
If we're up to me, it would be on the Hallmark Channel. Yes. I was listening to Game of Crimes podcast, and he did a repeat of one that they did with a LAPD SWAT officer dissecting Die Hard. They did it on Christmas Eve as well, and I got a kick out of it. Obviously there was a lot of Hollywoodish stuff going on, but the stuff
Sure.
that jumped out at me was, you remember, he's barefoot, and that's, a part of the whole story, that, he's chomping along on broken glass, running on it. If you look closely, they had specially fit shoes for Bruce Willis that looked like feet. So they're like bigger than normal. So he could run across the broken glass. It was really broken glass. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
that is.
Bruce had the Beretta 92F that never ran out of bullets until the end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was
I
pretty.
love that gun. That's what I carried. I
Well,
love
and
that.
you're in good company because of Bruce Willis and Die Hard. And who else had that gun in a great Hollywood movie that is kind of Christmassy? A police
Hmm.
story.
Ooh.
Lethal
Ooh.
Weapon, Mel Gibson.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that.
That was a 92F.
Yeah. How about that?
Another
Yeah.
Christmas
Great
police
gun,
movie.
man. Great gun. It never jammed up on me at all, ever.
Yeah,
Never
and
stovepipe, nothing,
they're
nothing.
accurate as hell. Oh my God, are
Yeah.
those things accurate? Holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one
We
as
had to,
well.
we had to, when we went from revolvers, um, and they started transitioning into the semi-automatics, if you had a revolver as your service weapon, you could carry a semi-automatic, as your secondary weapon.
Okay,
So, but you had to, of course, you had to,
qualify.
qualify with it. So when I bought the gun, I went down to the range and I said, I never owned a semi-auto before and
Yeah.
I want to come up. I went, he goes, okay, you know how it works though, right? I go, well, yeah, of course, And he goes, okay, you have a full mag, which is 14 plus one in the pipe.
Right.
So you got 15 rounds. He goes, go out to the range. There's a target out there already, and just empty the gun. Just go have fun. Just let it rip. Let it rip, and then we'll qualify after that. So okay, this will be fun, right?
Yeah.
Boom, I shut it all off, and I'm telling you, my pattern was about 8 inches
Yeah.
round. Wouldn't believe it. I thought I was just an average shot, but this thing was like, oh my God, I can't believe how accurate it was.
Well, after that first shot, the hammer stays back and the trigger pull is so light.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
makes a good shooter great and a great shooter like really good. So
yeah,
yeah, those are really cool guns. I did like those, but yeah, then other Die Hard stuff, some trivia. When Hans was at the very end, when they let go of him and he falls down Nakatomi Plaza, that they surprised
yeah,
Alan Rickman. Yeah, they were supposed to give him like the sign and then he'd be released. He was like on a cable. They never gave him the sign. So
yeah,
they did that in one take. And that look of shock is absolute shock because he thought he was going to get hurt. The director did that on purpose.
yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
That was,
And Bruce Willis
yeah,
had,
that
what
was
did they
great.
say? I think 16 or 17 t-shirt changes because it starts out white and then it gets dirtier and
Yeah,
dirtier and dirtier and bloodier and
it's like
bloodier and
black by the
yeah,
time the movie's over.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's funny to see like okay, you have a major incident and you have the douchebag assistant chief that comes in. I'm assistant chief, like something Powell, I think his name was.
yeah,
What was it? I forget. But
yeah,
and I'm thinking to myself, that would never ever happen. They don't want that responsibility ever. It's usually the sergeant or the lieutenant.
yeah.
That's
And
because then it's plausible
yeah,
deniability. When things go south, he's like, well, I wasn't in charge of that. O'Donnell was.
yeah. I loved it when the two FBI agents show up too, Agent Johnson and Agent
Yeah,
Johnson.
Johnson and Johnson. Not
No
related.
relation.
Yeah.
And and how they portrayed them as such dicks. I mean, they must
Yep.
have talked to
Oh,
Copper. How do we play these FBI agents?
right. And the FBI wouldn't just go in there and take over. They'd be like, yeah, we're
Oh no,
here.
they can't. They couldn't.
No,
It's not their jurisdiction.
no, it's not. And they don't want that bag of poop. I mean, they'll put their 2 cents in, and that's not the way it works. And the tank that they had, according to the SWAT guy for that time period, the only
Yeah,
armored thing that they had was this old Vietnam armored personnel carrier that they had. And it was nothing like that. So that's all Hollywood. And of course,
yeah.
the SWAT guys aren't going to go in the front door with just like
Okay.
maybe 5 or 6 guys. You won't see them coming.
Yeah,
Just it was silly, but hey, it was fun though. I love the movie.
yeah. I love it too. Christmas movie all the way.
Excellent. So Rich, let's talk about books. You have an exciting new series coming up. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's the Corpse Whisperer series. The first book is titled Dead Weight. The second book will be titled Deadline. Um, uh, and I've talked about this on your podcast before, where the main character can actually talk to his dead homicide victims, dead
Excellent.
murder victims, which makes his job easy in many respects, but also hard because he has to bear the weight of becoming emotionally entangled with these victims, um, where typically you don't. You got a dead
Right.
body, it's a piece of evidence now.
Right.
You don't care about it. But talking to them while they're dead and being listening to all their emotions and them asking him to say goodbye to people for him, he becomes like I said, emotionally entangled.
Right. No, I'm
And
very excited. I mean, I remember talking to you when this was just like starting, and I know this is going to be really good. And when are these books going to get released into the wild?
well, the first book is at my publisher now, Vinci Books, and they're telling me they'll publish it in February as long as I give them at least the first draft of the second book.
Well,
and I'm about halfway done with that.
okay, cool.
So
Get that done.
they kind of gave me a they kind of gave me a deadline by the end of January to have it done,
Damn it.
but I think I'll be done before then.
Good. Good, good, good. Excellent. So where do people go to find out more about you and your books?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Richard Rybicki, author. You can also go to my website, rrybickiauthor.com, and at Vinci Books, vinci-books.com.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I think that's going to do really well. As far as I'm going, I got the good collar. Hopefully, you'll be released very soon, like before 2025 soon. That's what I'm crossing my
Oh,
fingers
good.
for.
Next week, then.
Yep, next week, hopefully so. I wanted it tomorrow. I wanted it on December 26th, but that ain't gonna happen. But hey, thanks to all my betas and arcs and everybody else who's encouraged me with this project. I'm really excited. And just by coinkydink, there's a new Dexter series out.
Yeah, I
So
saw that.
I'm hoping that will help. It can only help. I'm also giving away a Kindle Fire and signed paperbacks and ebook copies of The Good Collar. The link will be in the show notes. So, you know what? I think that's all I've got for now. You got anything else?
No, I'm good.
All
I
right.
was, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. You betcha. You have a good Christmas and New Year's and all that good stuff. And
You
everybody
too.
else have a safe and happy holiday season and a great 2025. Clark and I are both going to tell you, hey, let's be careful out there. Right, Clark? All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.